The battle of wizards and warriors continues with iron swords. The evil wizard Malkill will take the shape of the earth, wind, water, and fire. Farewell! The fate of the world is in your hands!
You're listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Willett. I'm a professional body piercer with 20 years experience. I travel around the world teaching technique and safety classes, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers. Listen in as I talk to my friends and colleagues about our industry so we can all stay sharp. So, welcome back to yet another Piercing Wizard podcast. We are in Las Vegas currently, and why don't you introduce yourself first?
I am Bethrah Szumski from Georgia.
Deep.
I know. I'm Bethrah Szumski from Georgia. I work in a studio in Marietta, Atlanta, and Athens, Georgia, and I am going on 30 years of piercing experience.
How many of those have you owned a studio? The whole time? Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow. So I think, you pick up certain kinds of skills as you go, and I would imagine after 30 years of owning multiple studios, you picked up quite a few different skills.
I'd say, yeah. You get smarter over time about people, but then some things are always new. I feel like every new pivot, every new recession, it's all a little different than it was before. The challenges that you face are always a little different, so it doesn't ever feel like
you've got it figured out.
Yeah, I never am like, now I've got it. I'm always like, why don't I have it? Why am I this long and I don't know it all? Why? It's okay though.
You introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I am also here. My name is Lola Slider. You may know me from this podcast, and I own and pierce at Forest Piercing in Glasgow, Scotland.
So before we get into any other subjects, you said the word recession, and debatable. I use downturn a lot when I talk about money now, but I think that a lot of studios that have only been in operation for maybe 5 years or less, this huge boom of people that are starting this new generation of piercing studios, I wonder how terrified they are at small economic differences, because seeing you have to deal with COVID right after you opened your studio must have been pretty tough, but I didn't really feel like it was no biggie, but I felt a little bit more prepared to have some sort of economic crisis. So 30 years into it with multiple studios and lots of staff and all that stuff, does stuff like this feel a little bit less scary, intimidating, or does it feel potentially more scary or intimidating?
Oh, it's equally scary. So I feel like I think my ability to think long range and to strategize is greatly improved. So I don't think, say in 2008, I was as strategic of a thinker for a variety of reasons. I think I'm at an age where I have a little bit more confidence in my own sense of things, and I'm a little bit more clever. I'm a little bit wilier than I once was. And so I am viewing it a little differently. It's always a gamble, but I feel a lot more confident in a lot of the gambles that I'm making, and that comes to staffing. I'm a little bit overstaffed in one location with a couple of specific types of practitioners, but my tattoo, it was kind of a combination of the tattoo crew is kind of small, which is really good because the market is really small right now. So they're not making millions of dollars, but they all have food on the table. It's I'm not, I feel sorry for these shops with 10 tattooers. What are these people? I don't care how good they all are. They can't all be working. And so I think, and part of it is I have really good managers too. We have these conversations about okay, what are we doing? Where are we going? How do we pivot this time? What's the next thing? And I've typically assumed kind of a passive posture with regard to competition, but like in one location right now, like I'm flexing like I've never flexed before in business with that location.
Mm-hmm. So when you say flex, does that mean like jewelry, social media presence, staffing,
all of it,
just all
renovation,
of it, just to show like we're it?
I mean, the shop's been there almost 30 years,
Yeah.
and a lot of these others, I mean, we just sort of have been kept quiet, you know. We've just been sort of with our head down working, you know, and we've kind of let the market slip out of our hands in that location for no good reason. We're still the best practitioners in the area, but because we're not flashy,
Yeah.
we're not clever on social media, our place doesn't look hip. It's still got, you know, 90s checkered board floors and stuff. So we're get like a week after I get back, we're renovating. We start a big renovation. It's a huge deal, and it's
Yeah.
going to be beautiful. And so just stuff like that, like it's a weird time to spend that kind of money, but a lot of it's an investment in that location, and we're already seeing big returns from that.
That just, you know, that shows me someone who's been in business long enough where they don't see now is like the time where it's like, I need to keep every single penny, because you want to kind of come out of whatever we're going through right now really strong with momentum. You don't want to like, it's like a bear waking up from hibernation where you're like slow to get back at it.
No, all of these other folks are starving. That's the thing, is like, I can drop 6 figures into jewelry, and these other little shops can't. These other little shops that, you know, and it wasn't even that we had 1 or 2 good places. It was just that suddenly it was like 8 places. None of them are making very much money, but they have damaged us to an extent where our people aren't making a good living.
So one thing that kind of like brings up is, do you think that it's like a detriment that so many people, you know, kind of earlier on in their career want to jump off and open a shop rather than they want to work together, whether it's like work for somebody, with somebody, whatever the terminology might be? I feel like some people might maybe be serviced a little bit better by staying as part of a team for a while before they open a shop. It seems like they want to just jump right into it.
And definitely, I think people think like a shop in that same town just closed because they expanded too soon. This is not the time to go do your own thing. It's not the time to expand. If you're at a shop that is functioning well, that has business, it is not the time to go do your own thing.
Yeah.
It's the time to be happily making a paycheck where you are. And I think too, like, a lot of people are opening shops a lot sooner. Like the person that opened that shop, I think, had maybe 5 years of experience. And like, okay, so now you're the best artist there. You're running the you're you know, and that person decided to buy their building and then rent it. So it was like, so now you've bitten off all of these things, and you haven't even been in the industry long enough to know what happens when the economy tanks.
Yeah.
You haven't even been here long enough.
Or how to get through it.
Yeah, like you don't even know about austerity measures. You're like, yeah, you know, it's going to be great. And what I've seen too is a lot of these places would offer artists these huge, ridiculous percentages, and we've seen that in piercing where it's like, oh yeah, you'll keep, you know, 90% of your piercing fees. Well, 90% of zero is zero. So it doesn't matter how sweet the deal
I feel like that's a trick that some studio owners do, where like, I'll give you this great cut, but it's like a cut off of what?
Yeah, again, a percentage of nothing is still nothing.
I think like with you, like I really like the way that you do your studio, because you have like this like self-contained unit where you might have staff come or go or whatever, but it's like, you're the business, because like you were in business, and I'm speaking to Lola when I say this, like you were in business for like 10 years before you opened your shop, where you had that much experience. So like you had the legs under you to like know what makes a piercing business successful. I feel a little bit worried for some people that jump right into it if they're still in like a complete figure it out. Like if you're figuring out how to run a business, like I'm still trying to figure out how to run a business 20 something years in, but if you're trying to figure out piercing and what your market is and how to deal with the economy and how to run a business, it sounds like a little bit too much adversity.
I think that when I opened Forest, I was completely overwhelmed by how much I didn't know about running a business. And I think that a lot of people who have done what I did and basically ran a whole piercing department in a studio for almost a decade, you think, I can do this. And it's like, it's the tip of the iceberg when it comes to managing a property. When you're responsible for the plumbing and the electrics and fire safety and other people and their safety, it's so much more than, it's not just renting a property, it's a lot more than that. So it took me probably like the last 5 years of the first premises and the first lease to really just get to grips with that. Like there's so much more that I know now that I've learned over the last 5 years. But what I did know going into opening up Forest, what I didn't know about business, I was prepared to be broke. And I think that's something that you, because I've always been self-employed, I've always worked as a self-employed piercer. So when you say I'm the business, it's literal in the sense that I'm not an incorporated company or a limited company. The business is me and I'm the business, and that's a huge motivating factor. But it also means that ever since I was 20 years old, I've had good months and bad months, good weeks and bad weeks. So you kind of learn to live with that ebb and flow of sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, and you get really comfortable with that. So I'm not uncomfortable when I have a horrendous month and I'm like, okay, it's cheesy beanie toast this month. It doesn't bother me in any way. I know that I'm lucky in a sense to not be in a situation where I have dependents, children, like people that I need to care for in my life. It's really just me. But that was something that I had to be prepared for opening Forest, that I think some people might not have when they're opening up their first businesses. You have to be prepared for how broke you're going to be. Even opening up Forest 2, I was like, which is my still only one shop, but I call it Forest 2 in my head because it's a new location. I was like, this is going to be so much easier. I have so much experience. Every year the shop's done better than the last. I have excellent credit. I have like, what do you call it, assets? Yeah, I have assets. And no bank would work with me, no bank would help me, and it was because it was piercing. They said it was either against their ethics policy or that it was too high risk, and they still very much treat it like it's all ran by bike gangs in the 80s. You know, like it hasn't changed at all. And even from my perspective, you know, basically taking only card payments at this point, pretty much everything being legitimate, paying I've always paid my taxes and all that stuff, and it's like they do not care. And that was a huge blow to me, because I think you do think, and you're taught from such a young age, if you play the game and do everything right, people will have to work with you. And to get to being that age, all this experience, the shop actually doing the thing and then being like, it's going to be a no from us, and then asking why, and them saying, we just consider you too high risk. And you're like, but I've done this I've never been in debt, I've never defaulted, I've never missed a payment, I've never missed a payment on anything, and you know, I have all of this good stuff going for the business. If it was any other business, you would work with it, but they're like, no, we're not going to work with it. So getting to that point, doing Forest 2 and really having to just be a zero again, that was hard. But at least I had the knowledge to be able to make it a little bit easier on myself than the first time round, but that was definitely tough.
With the scale of your businesses, do you still get that kind of like people looking down their nose when they find out that you're in body art?
I have assets.
Yeah. So you
know what I mean? Like I had some real estate assets, just because me and Cap had bought a house in '97 and then split it for the divorce. So I've borrowed on my real estate.
Yeah.
So like I had something to borrow on, and that's the difference when you're taking a business loan, is that when you have something to borrow on, they can come take your house if you don't pay.
Sure.
So it doesn't matter. You have an asset.
Yeah.
It's secured. It's a secured loan. But yeah, I don't know that I think maybe, no, I've never taken an unsecured loan. I've never been able to. The only loan I ever got was the PPP, and that was forgiven. So yeah, I've just been really fortunate to have an asset that I could leverage always.
Well, when I tried taking out the loans, and I'm not even talking about big loans, I can make a little bit of money go a really long way. And it wasn't a huge amount of money that I was after at all, just something to help ease the transition so I didn't have to use all my savings, which I did eventually have to use, which is fine because it's what they're for, but obviously starting again from zero. But when my bank rejected me, I actually went through an appeals process where they have to give you a reason, because I was like, I tick off all of this stuff, like what's going on here? And they basically said, well, you're not married and you don't own a house.
Yeah.
And it was like weirdly really upsetting.
Yeah.
Because I used to be married and I used to own a house. And I got divorced and I just gave up the house and left that, which was fine. Like it was my decision to do that. But I just remember thinking like, but I'm doing so much better financially now in so many ways. How can I be worse off now? But they were like, yeah, that's really all that we're interested in.
Yeah.
And it does just make you feel like a piece of shit, because you're like, you haven't ticked off, or you're not currently a holder of, you know, being married and having a house. It makes you feel like reduced in a lot of ways when you're like, but I've done all of this work and I'm succeeding and like I'm doing everything I'm meant to do, and they're just like, yeah, we just won't trust you with it.
You know, when Alicia was finishing up, she had come to visit. I don't know why she was at my house, but she was just at the tail end of building Soul Tribe, the one that's there now, or maybe even the one before. I don't know. I think there were a couple iterations. And she told me, Bethrah, I had to borrow the money from a loan shark to finish this business. A loan shark, and met him in a fucking alley. A fucking loan shark. I was like, dang. Yep. Yes, you did.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just how it is.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
So if you or either of you had advice, because like you come to a conference like this, the biggest numbers the conference has ever had, you're going to have a lot of like younger piercers who are going to go home feeling like so inspired. They're going to meet all these other people that have different shops, and they're going to think like, well, I could do that. And it's like, I want to encourage people to like go after their dreams, but at the same time, I want people to like sit down and make a business plan first instead of like jumping into it. So like, is there advice that you would give to someone who feels like they're ready to open a shop? Is there anything that you might want to tell like a hypothetical person?
Don't do
like
it
that?
right now.
Yeah.
It's a horrible time. Like, do it when we're back on an upswing, when interest rates are low again, where you can actually get a loan that's not basically like a loan shark.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And wait until the market's back up. Like, there could not possibly be a worse time to open a new body art business or a nail salon or any other service that someone doesn't have to spend on to live.
Right.
It's just a terrible idea.
Because if they have to
right
tighten
now.
the straps for their bills.
Yeah, it's the first thing to go.
Yeah.
And so now, like I said, if you're earning a paycheck and you're, you know, and there are so many steps, like, do your market research, have a plan. Don't just be like, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think some of the most
That's a good
successful.
way to not do that.
Yeah. Some of the most successful shops that I've seen, and some of the more successful business people, like they have targeted markets. It's not just like, well, I live in this city, so I'm going to open a shop down the street so I have an easy commute. It's like, this is a market, a community that's underserviced, or like this is a college campus where there's nothing else going on in that area. So it's like, yeah, have a plan. But like right now, it's like if somebody was like, I have a great location and you should, and it's just like, talk to me in 18 months or 2 years or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people out there that are like really businessy. I've never been really businessy. Yeah, I just got really lucky.
Yeah.
No, I'm just really lucky and I'm clever. You know what I mean? Like, think the economy starts to go down, I start to invest in like lower turnaround pieces. Yeah. You know, like I had this conversation with someone else 6 months ago and talked about how like I'm working, you know, like I'm still buying gold, but it's all basics. We cannot keep the basics in stock. So if that's what they're buying, that's what I'm buying.
Yeah. We just did a whole episode about that, just basically being like, is that like top market sustainable, and I don't think it is. And the big point that Lola brought up was like, I think it's like titanium customers that keep businesses in business. And it's like, if you want to expand into gold and try to pull in those more like fashion focused clients, that's great, but I don't think those people are always going to be there. So
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that that's even too wide of a thing, right? Like, so you've got titanium pieces and then you've got high-end gold pieces, but what lives in between are basic gold, balls, discs,
tri-beads,
hammer disc, tri-beads, gems that turn around for $100. You know what I mean? Like there's that, and then there's like slightly nicer titanium. Like, okay, so this titanium piece is $60, $70, $80.
Yeah.
It's like this kind of like Goldilocks set of jewelry where, and also there's a sort of this different psychological thing. It's like, okay, well, I'm not buying the $500 piece, and I'm not buying the $30 piece, but you know what? I can pull it together for $125.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
I think that's what makes a successful shop.
Yeah.
Is being able to have that range and letting the client find their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you don't, if you're like, oh, we have like all of this $1,000 BVLA stuff, that's what you're looking at.
I mean, if you can move that, awesome. More power to you.
You know, I just, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Come on. Here's the thing, sometimes people can afford that later and they can't afford it today. Sometimes they're not cheap, they're just broke, and you need to help people where they're at.
That's exactly the point that she made.
The other thing I think is like wildly hypocritical is this is an industry where everybody prides themselves on being for the people, but they're mostly fucking not.
Yeah.
They're mostly not.
Yeah.
In the same breath, their prices have outpaced the market that they're in wildly. Like, don't talk about how for the people you are when your services are not affordable to the average person, or you're not taking cash anymore.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Go fuck yourself with that. Sorry. You know what I mean? Like, no.
Yeah.
Cash is fine.
In terms of like advice for people opening up studios, if they do go ahead with that and they're on a limited budget, like I was on a limited budget, the best advice I have would be you have to be able to just shit good ideas every day, constantly. Like, have a plan, have a lovely plan. I had a plan. My plan got torn to pieces. I had plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D.
You got down to like plan X.
Every bit of every plan was basically just rejected or wasn't achievable for some reason, even though I had planned for it to be. So you have to just be able to constantly shit good ideas. Like, don't hang everything on this has to work. Like, there has to be okay, well, that didn't work. What do we have today? What are we doing now? This is a no, so what are we doing now? Like, I had so many of those moments where, like, if you need to, if you hit a really bad block, take a day, regroup, get some brain space, and then what are we doing today? Like, you have to be able to pivot that way.
So I think that is speaking to sort of this fluid, Napoleon was like that. Very fluid. I think I really love that, and it's this idea that like you just change directions. That's how water moves. It reaches an obstacle, it just changes directions, and that's that same like. I think it's great to have a plan, but it's almost more important what you do when that isn't going to work, and that's what you're describing. You're describing like a really fluid form of problem solving and evolving through a problem, and I think it's the very best form of thinking. It really, really is.
So we got some business talk out of the way and we kind of warmed up a little bit, so I wanted to kind of, we were talking about it before I hit record where it was a little bit vague on my idea, but I wanted to try to talk about some things that can loosely fall into like mental health. I don't like to use the term self-care all the time because like anything can fall into self-care. But mental health is, I think, something that we could probably do with hearing a little bit more about. So what would either of you want to put out there in the world for the community for mental health? And I liked your idea of just talking about being more receptive to things like therapy and things like that. So how could we get a conversation on that rolling? So
I think for starters, I think that we're in we're in a little time frame of that has felt really jarring. I think we've had a couple of recent suicides, and that's really jarring. Anytime someone goes and it's sudden, whether they're taken out with violence or self-harm, it's like it's shocking in a really particular way. And I think one of the phenomenon that I see is where we'll often listen to each other where we are, but what often doesn't happen is really direct accountability. Like, nobody wants to be, people will listen, but I think it's really important that when you listen, that you're an active listener and that you ask important questions. Like, it's okay to listen to someone where their struggles are, but it's very much equally important to ask them what kind of support they're getting. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, like, you have this going on, can you talk to me about what does your support network at home look like? Because a lot of times people come, especially to events like this, and they're like, oh, I'm going to be around all my friends, and my friends are going to help me through this time, and I'm going to tell all them that's going on. But they don't live in your town. They're not there to help you when you're struggling with your whatever it is, whether it's like addiction or depression or circumstances. They're not there to pick up those pieces with you in your regular life. And so in a way, it's kind of cheap support. So I think it's really important when you're listening to these stories from the people that have come to you with their stuff, to be really an active listener in terms of like, okay, so what are you doing? Go home and get a therapist. Go home and find a group. What is this myth of self-sufficiency? It's a myth. It's
That's
bullshit.
kind of why I don't like self-care, because sometimes people are just like, well, as long as I light enough candles, or as long as I get the right bath bomb, everything will be fine.
Yeah, that's it. Or as long as I talk about it enough. But and that the thing is, like, talk therapy, I do believe in. But like, talk therapy is not something that happens with your friends.
Yeah.
They're not, yeah. And also, like, sometimes people will be sour on therapy in general because they had a bad experience, or, well, you know what, therapists are just people, and they're all different kinds of ones. There's all different kinds of groups. There's all different kinds of support out there. You know what I mean? Like, keep on going.
Yeah.
You're worth it. If you're struggling, you're worth it.
My dad, so my stepmother just passed away, and my dad was like talking about, well, maybe I could talk to a therapist, but he always brings up, when he divorced my mother in like 1984, he talked to a therapist, and he's like, oh yeah, I only went to one session and we didn't really click, so I don't think therapy's for me. And it's like, that was like however many years ago.
That was one experience decades ago. Yeah. Or like a support group for divorcees.
Yeah.
There's a million of those every single place in the world. Mm-hmm. Nobody is like, yay, divorce, or yay, my partner died, or yay, like, no one is like loving that time in their life.
Sure.
Those times are awful. That's why there are support groups. Like, go find the one that is your issue, But I think this idea, I really struggle with this sort of group discussion about all of our triggers and all of our difficulties that doesn't amount in any solutions at all. I think that keeps us all sick. Collectively, I think it keeps us sick, because there is support. There is real help.
What do you think about that? Like, what would you want to volunteer to a conversation without me trying to pull anything out of you?
Well, I was very resistant to going to therapy for years and years. And firstly, I would just say therapy doesn't have to be like in person sitting on a couch. Like, I do phone therapy, so I'm not in person in a room. I still feel like I have a good relationship with my therapist, but we talk on the phone, so it doesn't matter what I look like. You don't have any, there's nothing in your head that's at all concerned about how you look. And I think for me that's important for therapy, to properly be able to make myself feel comfortable and not have to worry about what I look like at all. you know, like especially if I need to ugly cry or something. But the thing that kept me resistant for such a long time is, the big thing is you do think you're not worth it. Like you just think, I'm not worth it. And the other thing is, when someone says to you, you should try therapy, the thoughts that go through your head are, what, so you don't want to talk to me? It's very defensive. Or if not that, it's like, oh, so you think I'm crazy now? You know, it's like, it's very defensive thoughts that go through your head. And the first reaction is, it feels like a rejection. When someone says you should try therapy, it feels like you're being rejected because this person is deferring you to talk to someone who's a professional.
Like, stop bothering me with your problems and pay somebody to talk about it.
So that's what a lot of people hear when they're advised to go to therapy. And it's like, you have to, I mean, I'm not saying that you should let it get as bad as possible, but for me, it did have to get so bad that I was like, I have to try something, because if I'm not, I'm making my life worse, I'm making your life worse. Like, I have to take action and do something. So if it's trying the therapy, then I'll try the therapy. Like, you have to look at it through the lens of, I'm doing nothing to make this better. Like, I'm doing nothing to make this better, and it's been years and it's not going away. So, like, what's the worst that could happen if you give it a try? If it doesn't work, you know, maybe try something else or try someone else. But I think you kind of have to get to that point where you accept that this isn't getting better. So you need to stop being defensive about it. And I think that another element of it is, a lot of the time you don't want to, it feels like there's too much to talk to a therapist about, because where do you start? You know, like, where do you start when you talk to a therapist? So I think that it's almost like when you have too much housework to do, so you don't do any, because you just don't know where to even start making a dent in it. So when you have that first conversation, you're like, what do you want to know? Like, and it's kind of trying to pinpoint a reason why you're in therapy, but you don't really have one. It's a lot of things. So I would just say maybe try and start with describing how you're feeling, like how you're being affected, or how your mental health is affecting your day-to-day life, particularly in the ways that it's become unmanageable, which for me is definitely anxiety issues becoming unmanageable. And it's definitely helped. Like, it's definitely helped. If for no other reason, then it gives you a place to put a lot of the thoughts that you have during the course of a week. And you don't know what it's like to be able to put down some of those thoughts until you found somewhere neutral, like a therapist, to put them. So you're not putting them on a relative or a loved one or a friend and feeling the guilt of having burdened that person. You're putting them on someone who's totally cool with it. It's their sole purpose in your life is to carry that. So being able to unburden yourself and not feel the guilt of that, if you haven't done that before, you won't know how positively beneficial that can be. And it's not gonna like instantly fix you or cure you or make your life better, but there's definite improvements that I think I can see. And it's also good for somebody, I think, that's completely independent to know you. You know, like you're talking about how people can be a mirror. Sometimes it's nice to get to know someone in an unguarded way, without fear of judgment, without worrying about how you come across or what you look like. And it does help you go a bit easier on yourself sometimes, I think. Having somebody to talk to that's in a neutral space, whose judgment you don't have to worry about, the same as anyone else in your life. So I think that all of those things can be really beneficial, but the biggest barrier is just thinking that you're not worth it. Like, it's almost as if you described your problems to someone and they described those exact problems back to you, you'd be like, oh my God, go to therapy. So that's the thing you have to get past, is feeling like, I'm just not worth it. So other people are worth it, but I'm not worth it.
I think it depends on who you are. I think, like, for myself, I'm very much motivated by the level of discomfort that I have. Like, I was this morning in the car, I was like, I've been emotional the last couple of days, but there's been this thing that's been popping up for me. And it's something that happened when I was about 15, and I like, it'll pop up once in a while. I don't usually think about it too much. It's something that I have a lot of shame over. And it's something that I did wrong. It wasn't like a sexual thing or anything. It was like just something that, just to clarify, like it was a thing I did that was really awful. And I was in a really bad place. Like I was trying to get away from this super abusive partner. I had a brand new baby. Like I'm like 15 doing all this, and like I was doing what I needed to do to get away. But there was something that happened in that process that I am so fucked up over still, and it's been coming up lately. And I was thinking about it in the car, and I just was feeling so bad about it and sad, and starting to process like, okay, well, Bethrah, where were you at this time? Like, you know, this is a big part of it, right? That you weren't old enough, you didn't have the coping skills. Like you were 15, you weren't 53, you were 15, and luckily, like these days, that voice in my head doesn't tell me I'm not worth it. That voice in my head tells me to get therapy. I was like, the voice in my head said, oh, Bethrah, go back to therapy. I was like, okay, voice in my head that's weirdly healthier than I am.
Well, it's good to be able to talk to yourself that way, because like I've been in therapy for I don't know how many years at this point, but up until that point I had that mentality of like, I can run a business, I can own a house, like I can figure out my own brain. Or it's like, what's wrong with just being a little sad all the time? Or what's wrong with having horrible like interpersonal social skills or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And then it was just like you wake up one day and you're like, I don't care what I have to tell a stranger. I don't care what medication they might recommend. I have to live differently because like the life I live right now is not sustainable.
Right, where you just, it gets so itchy, you have to make it, you have to do something different. You're like, this is the worst.
Yeah. And like when people start getting to that point where they're either thinking about therapy or they just kind of need that last little nudge to actually like make the call or the appointment or whatever, I always like to tell them the advice that helped me the most when I started is just like, just make sure that you talk to them honestly. You don't have to hold back with a therapist because like they're never going to tell anybody what you tell them. Like
unless you murdered someone.
Well, yes. But like you can talk honestly because like however many conversations the three of us are going to have this week where people walk up and they're like, hey, how are you doing? You're like, I'm great. Like what else are you ever going to say? You know, I'm great. But it's like when you talk to a therapist, you can be like, fucking everything sucks. Or you can be like, you know, most things suck, but this one thing. So it's like you got to talk honestly, and you have to be able to share, and you have to realize that like they're this little island out there in the world. They don't know anybody you know. Nobody you know knows them or even knows their name or what they look like. And you can just talk honestly with them. They're your little vault.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. What else do we want to chat about?
So, we could talk a little bit about how to maintain a healthy mental load here at conference.
Okay. Write it down so I can read it tomorrow.
Yeah. Because it is overwhelming, even for people that have been many
You've been
years.
here more than we have. So what does the conference experience feel like to you? Like, do you just like, you dip in, you want to get the things you want to get and you want to get out? Or like, is this like your big Disneyland week for the year?
No.
Yeah.
It's my marathon week of the year.
Yeah.
And it's just so many people this year. I was just kind of like overloaded, even more than normal. No, I shut down to the point where I don't even know who anyone is. Mm-hmm. I just gum my way through it.
You just do you put on the smile all week, or are you just like, hey, it's so good to see you, or are you just like?
Well, I do that because I forget who people are. If I see a look of recognition, I just return it.
Yeah. Good to see you again. And then somebody comes back with that. Oh, it's so nice to finally meet you, and be like, oh, we haven't met yet.
Oh. I mean, luckily this year I'm not mentoring anyone, so I can't disappoint anyone like that. But yeah, I'm just gonna get through it.
What's it like for you?
It's a lot of things, because obviously we don't get to see each other very often. So when we come to events like this, it's also time to spend together. We're also working the booth, and there's also instructing, and it's almost like you have all of these different, like the person that I am when I'm instructing is not the person that I am normally. And you know that because I talk a lot slower and I swear less, like when I'm instructing. So it's almost like you have to be that person, like the person that can do that thing, which I can do, but it's like, it's not the person that I am when we're hanging out alone. So you have those little different compartmentalized personalities almost a little bit. And I think like the main thing I would just want to get across to attendees is that piercers are an awfully anxious bunch for a combination of reasons. And when you come to an event as big as this, well in excess of 1,000 people, there's nothing that you're experiencing that someone else isn't also experiencing. No matter how many years they've been, there's going to be people here that adore you. There's going to be people here that maybe don't like you very much. But it's a massive, massive event. I mean, like, if there's 1,000 people and 10 people hate your guts, that's like a 99% approval rate. That's incredible. Like, so you have to think in those terms of like, it's impossible for over 1,000 people to get on with me. You know, like whoever it is that you are, that's important. And just be okay with it. Like there's so much to do, and you can decide to do all of it or none of it. But I think just not convincing yourself that you're sticking out like a sore thumb and everyone's noticing you for all the wrong reasons, because it's not happening and everyone's thinking the same thing.
I think too, a lot of people that haven't been to this event and they're getting their information from the internet about what it is.
Yeah.
They already have their backup when they get here. They're like, oh, they're gonna be like this, and it's gonna be like this, and then maybe they're gonna try and hurt my feelings. And because like if you look at the internet, it's just like wall-to-wall abusers, and like everybody's out to get you and treat you bad, and it's actually not that. And it's, you know, things come up, they do, but at a way lower percentage level than that, you know what I mean? Like, like yes, people say mean things to each other. Sometimes they're not nice. It is to such a lower, like just because you heard about that one person or two people on the internet that had a negative experience, like that's a couple people. Like don't make that be your loudest voice. This thing is exactly what you make it. Go to bed early.
Yeah, like another thing, just from going down to the area to pick up badges and do like registration and all that stuff, you meet a lot of new people who are just like so nervous for the week, and they're like, oh my god, I'm so nervous to be here. And you're like, why? Like we're all just piercers here to learn. Nobody's gonna like put you in a cannon and fire you out into the desert or anything. Like
fear of imaginary things is a waste of time. Like there's a lot of things to be afraid of that are real. Just avoid the ones that aren't.
Yeah, and just law of averages, law of percentages. It's like if you talk to someone that you don't like gel with or vibe with, just like turn 30 degrees and there'll be another 50 people that you could try talking to.
And also people have their own walls up. Sometimes the reaction that you get from someone doesn't, in fact usually it doesn't have anything to do with you. You know?
There's also a lot of just like people have different speech patterns and behavioral patterns where you might think, did they not like me, or was I being rude, or were they being rude? And you read into things in a really weird way. Like an example that I often give is that obviously me and Ryan are a couple, but when I first started communicating with Ryan, I was like, this guy fucking hates me. Like when we had to instruct together and stuff like that, he would always be really monosyllabic, and I would be like, okay, so what are we doing with this and this and this? And he would just be like, okay. And I'd be like, oh wow, Ryan hates me. But it's just like that's how he would communicate at the time. There was nothing like negative about it. It's just sometimes neutral things can come across as negative to people that are interpreting them that way. So a whole lot of the time, like unless someone's actually like really going out of their way to be unpleasant to you, there's a good chance you're imagining it.
I have a sort of conference question for you.
Sure.
Like when you're in an environment like this, are you actively scouting, or do you just kind of like keep your ears and eyes open for anyone that seems interesting, or do you have like other people within your business that are kind of, that's more their role?
Oh, for hiring?
Yeah.
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
I don't even, I hardly ever pay attention.
So what does it take, like, in your studios, if it's like, oh yeah, this person wants to come shadow, this person maybe wants to kind of get a job, this person wants to whatever, like, what are the things that put people on your radar? Or is it like your managers, your staff are doing that for you?
I have to need someone.
Yeah.
And we're like overstaffed right now. So if I actually needed someone, I would be more on the lookout, but I would post. I'd look at resumes, I'd call references. If they wanted to meet here, fine. But I don't I don't do a lot of scouting. It is actually really hard to get on my radar at all. Like if I have to meet someone new, then I gotta forget like 3 old people, and that's, you know what I mean? Like, I think, and that's why I don't mentor people anymore, because what'll happen is, if I don't actually see someone, a lot of times what'll happen is, as soon as they see me speak on stage, they're afraid to approach me in person. Now they don't want to like contact me when they're like freaked out about something. So I end up doing a lot of follow-up. But then, since I only meet them the once, and I don't recognize them again. And year to year, I had a woman come up to me and she was like, oh, I was your mentee last year, and I didn't have any I met her once for 5 minutes. Like, and then all these faces, like, I just thought, I'm just gonna save these people, like, and get them some better, like, it's just not working. But then, like, being able to mentor speakers is really good. Like, so I think, like, actually the best way to get on my radar as a human is probably to make me laugh. You know what I mean? Like, is to say something funny and not be weird around me. Or like, so yeah. Or I just, like I said, I have too much. Campers are pretty visible for me.
Yeah, well, that's more probably an intimate kind of setting.
We're all eating together and hanging out. There's like a whole several days where like it's a low stress environment where we're taking 3 meals together. We're all taking classes together. Like, it's an opportunity to actually like associate names and faces. And yeah, this is not that.
No. Yeah, this is the opposite of camp.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd want to mention?
It's booking faster than it ever has. I expect it to sell out ahead of the deadline, but we'll see.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just to like throw in like maybe like one last thing to wind it down, especially if like you have a lot of staff and like, you know, of maybe different experience levels, like points in their career, I mean. Have you noticed like a thing where like piercers just don't really have anything that shows that they're a piercer anymore? Like the way to articulate it is like I register a lot of my private classes and I just want some sort of verification that you're in a studio. And a lot of times they don't really have anything to show me, because it's like maybe they're in an area without a license, but they might also have no business card, no portfolio, no website, no presence on their studio's website, and all these different things. And it's like, you got to show me something that shows that you're in a studio. And it's like, it seems like that's not really a prioritized thing for a lot of younger people earlier in their career at this point. They maybe put out something on an Instagram page, but there's almost no other footprint for them as a piercer.
Yeah, I just think that's low professional standard. Like, I mean, I've been asking for resumes, and that was shocking for a lot of people. Like, back in the 90s, I'd be like, okay, bring me a resume, and there would be a look of shock. Like, why would I provide a resume? I'm like, because it's a job.
Counter staff, and
it's a job.
They're just like, you want me to what?
Yeah, it's a job at a
what's your experience?
Place of business. Yeah, I want a resume. Yeah. And I think it's something like that. Like, people like think, oh, you know, why would I do all that when I'm working from?
I've already got the job.
I have Instagram and I already have the job. So I think it's just an issue of sort of people just don't have a sense that they need any of that stuff. Or maybe they can't afford it. You know, maybe it's like their free Instagram page is all they can afford, and they're, you know, working in some crummy.
I just want to tell people that it's like, you know, the studio you're in, if that's your first studio, chances are that won't be your last studio. Right. So like, what would you want to be able to show somebody else about like the body of your work. Yeah, because like, you know, you don't really have a lot of physical portfolios now, but you have your previous physical portfolios, and you have so many different kinds of like internet things to show people. It seems like a lot of people haven't thought of that yet because they might still be in their first studio. Yeah. Well, that's it. I don't really have a fully formed thought on that one. Anything else either of you want to?
I really hope that people listen to this podcast and hear Bethrah say that she likes it when people make her laugh, and then people are just constantly coming up to her telling her jokes.
So I might remember you if you say something funny.
They just do stand-up routines in the elevator?
Yeah, people will just nonchalantly come up and then tell a joke, and you'll just be staring at them real deadpan, and they'll just be like, okay, and then they'll just walk off.
All right.
But if it's a bad joke, they'll be ruined forever.
Yeah.
They'll remember that forever.
So people are going to be approaching you with their best material.
Yeah.
People are deeply terrified often of me somehow. I don't get it.
You're an intimidating person.
I don't know why.
I think it's because you're confident. I think a lot of people walk around this conference and they feel like, you know, like, oh, who am I? I'm just a mouse, you know, in the house.
I'm just a worm.
You're like, you know, you're Bethrah.
So I think that that's actually interesting that you say that, because I was having this conversation earlier today with someone about how I feel often like a fraud.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think everybody does. Women especially feel like frauds. Especially if they've achieved something. Even though, like, I've been working since I was 14 years old.
Yeah.
I left home when I was 14. I raised a kid. She's a fucking college graduate. Like, I've done a lot of things just from working hard and being clever. And, but yeah, no, I still feel like a fraud, often.
Well, I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's like, somebody on the outside, it doesn't really carry a lot of weight if they're just like, oh, you're not, you know. But it's like,
no,
I remember
I just know how to stand tall.
Well, yeah, when I was younger at this conference, there would be people where you'd be like really intimidated if you needed to like ask them a question or something. So like, you know, I was very intimidated by you with like your position within the organization and as an instructor and all those things. And I think part of it was kind of like a jealousy of just like, how can I get people to take me seriously, and how can I, you know, whatever. And it's like the other aspects, like she tries to explain to me sometimes just like social things that like, you know, a guy might not think about, you know. And yeah, I mean, it's got to be tough in a lot of different ways, but you've always seemed like a boss to me, so in a good way.
I've always been one.
Yeah.
But I think it's what's important for people to understand about that is that that's a job. It's not like a
personality. Yeah,
like I do that because it's my job, not because I like know anything special that anybody else doesn't know. You work long enough.
Yeah, but some people have to have the interest to care about finding out those things and all that stuff, you know. So like there's a certain level of engagement required to kind of like have that kind of worldliness.
All it is the ability to fail.
Yeah.
I definitely have that.
No, I mean really, like it's the ability to fail. How well do you fail? How well do you have someone tell you in your face your job is garbage, you're bullshit, everything you do, all this time you donate is worthless, and then you just get up and you just still do it. How well do you fail? That's it. How well do you fail? How much of a cockroach are you? I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
That's real. Just keep on going.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of people over time, like, you know, being in that like volunteer and volunteer adjacent space within the industry, I've seen a lot of people come in a volunteer role and then they face some sort of like a conflict with someone or a challenge or something, and then they just like resign, or they just leave, or they just go off. And it's just like, what if you stayed? What if you had stayed for the full length of your term? What if you had stayed in that conversation with those people who told you, no, that's a bad idea? And what if you stayed long enough to convince them otherwise? Or what if, you know, you took another shot at something? More
importantly, what if you stayed long enough to convince yourself otherwise?
Yeah.
Because then you can grind their bones to make your bread.
Yeah. I think vengeance is one of the best career motivators.
No, I mean, but living well is the best revenge.
No, I agree.
Succeeding where people have said you're going to fail is the best revenge.
Yeah.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
You know, making them wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm counter-suggestible too.
Mm-hmm.
That helps. It helps with the like cockroach part.
Define that, please.
Keep on coming back.
Yeah.
When people like shoo you away.
Yeah. Just be like, no, I'm still here.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah.
I've been told I'm very confrontational.
Oh, really?
And I think that how I deal with it at things like this, when you get that imposter syndrome of like, I don't belong here, it's like, you don't fucking belong here either. And if you're here, I can be here.
Yeah.
It's like, it's that thing of like anything negative you think about yourself, it's probably true of just about everyone else. So it doesn't make any sense leaving.
Yeah. Just keep on coming back. Get your feelings hurt. Show them they're wrong.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's good nihilistic motivation.
I love it.
All right. Well, plug for camp if somebody's interested in camp. It's a APP members only event, but where would they go to get more info?
Just the safepiercing.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Easy.
Any other contact or info you want people to have for you?
Bethrah9 on the Instagram with the H. BETHRAH9.
Okay.
Follow me on Instagram.
Follower.
I think that's what all the kids are doing now.
Yeah. No, I think all the
They're
kids are on TikTok now.
Dang, but maybe they'll make it illegal.
I refuse to. TikTok. That'll show them.
That'll show them all those million follower TikTokers.
I'm not on it either.
I don't even know what the fuck it is.
Yeah. She's tried explaining it to me, but it just
Listen,
doesn't.
I like watching people rant in their cars about random stuff. So if I watch it, it's like 3 hours is gone, so I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh.
I'm not on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, people on there scare me.
All right, well,
suck it.
thank you both. For more information about the show, visit piercingwizardpodcast.com or like Piercing Wizard Podcast on Facebook. For more info about your host, visit precisionbodyarts.com or search Ryan PBA on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. If you enjoy the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcast, and Google Play. Music by Benny B. Blanco. Show copyright 2017, Precision Body Arts LLC, all rights reserved.